This video is about the inspiration, design, and creation of this stained glass window. Eleanor Roosevelt was an American political figure, diplomat, and activist. Served as the First Lady of the United States from March 4, 1933 to April 12, 1945 during her husband's 4 terms as president. This is the house where she spent time as a child, and that is the window that Stephanie saw while looking at this house, which is for sale, by the way, for only $900,000. It's the Gatehouse to the main house you saw there in the photo. Well, I don't have the heart to tell Stephanie that I don't believe the window that she likes was ever seen by Eleanor Roosevelt, because I think it was a much newer window made probably when they renovated it beginning in about 2000. It's all put together with copper foil, and there's some things about it that this doesn't look old. There are a couple windows, these 2 windows here, that are, in fact, I think, original windows, these Gothic-looking shaped windows with the fleur-de-lis inset circle or disc. I think those are old, but I don't believe that one is that she likes. But anyway, we're going to use that because that's what she wants. Today we're going to create a stained glass window to fit in that door you just looked at. I ordered some bevels and then went to the florist and had the professional florist put this little bouquet together and brought it home, and was inspired to make this window here between the bouquet and the Roosevelt window. So the first thing I did was sit down at the table and draw a quick rough sketch of the bouquet that was prepared, and just the kind of loose, impressionistic kind of sketch. And then from that we use what's called butcher paper, and it's just rolled up. It's kind of got like a waxy material on one side. The other's just smooth paper, and it works real well for making these cartoons because it takes a little water and it doesn't hurt it. So I took the bevels and kind of messed with them and found an arrangement that looked like a vase. Because I wanted to put our flowers in the vase, and I began working from the sketch and the flowers to build a sketch or cartoon of what the window was going to be, how it was going to be constructed. Now here you see the ABC. What you have to do when you draw this is draw something that you can cut out of glass. You can't just cut any shape out of glass. It has to be no inside curves too much. You can't cut a hole out of the middle of a piece of glass, etc. So it's off to the workshop to put this thing together. I'll show you step by step how it goes. We'll get started. So first of all, we have 3 of these designs. They're called a cartoon in this kind of work, and it's simply a line drawing of how the glass is going to look. We talked about how to make that, and then what I usually do is I'll run off 3 copies of this. I'll take it to a copy place, blueprint place. I'll draw the original, which is this one, and then I will, before I color it in, I'll take it to a copy place, a blueprint place, and have them run off a couple copies. I think it was like $14, but you get an exact duplicate of what you created the first time. Now, this copy here, I got 3. Like I said, I got 3 copies. I got this colored one here to kind of go to help me understand how the colors are going to work. And what I will say is that I take a pencil and I color this thing in to give me an idea of how the glass is going to look. And primarily, I do this because things in nature are never just one color. If you made this, okay, I'm going to make these leaves blue, and you made them all blue, well, it would look rather flat, and you'd really have more of a geometric design. You wouldn't really have a thing that looks like something like nature, like a real plant. So I'm looking at this like it's all about the light and the light source. So the light source is coming from this direction. So you see, I'm envisioning a lighter colored piece of palm or whatever this kind of plant is here, this grass looking thing. It's going to be lighter where the sun's coming on this side. Likewise with this, it's going to be illuminated lighter on the tops of the flower leaves, and then it's darker up underneath where it folds over. What some of these stained glass guys do is they'll try to take nature and just kind of like electrify it. you exaggerate the magnificent colors, and it comes out when you look at it more powerful than if you were standing there looking at a vase with flowers in it. That's the goal anyway. It doesn't always work, but to really maximize the colors and what the glass can do. So not only does this idea of, like, this particular leaf here is folded over on itself, and when the light hits it, it does things to it, like it'll make it look more yellow than it does green. So you can do some of that with it to give your plants a look of reality and depth, especially. Otherwise, it'll just lay there flat. So anyway, that's the drawing I keep on the wall so I can reference it while I'm cutting the glass and picking the glass, because you have to select the glass to match the effect that you've envisioned here on the drawing. So this one will be the one that is on the workbench. There's a bug there making its way across, and that'll be where I actually cut and lay the glass and let it together. Now this other one here is sitting on a light box, and I made this. It's just a simple plexiglass on top. It's lined with aluminum foil, and then there's a very bright light underneath, and you set the cartoon on top of that. So the way that works, let me get a piece of glass here. Well, this one's fairly opaque. It'll be a little bit hard to see, but I'll try it. Yeah, see, it's very difficult to see. But you can see, when you look through this, this has got a lot of color in it. Yeah, see that piece of that leaf? You see that underneath there? You see how this, if I was to trace that and cut that out, I'd have a piece, if the light was shining on it, it would be illuminating this and making it very bright. And this, being in the shadows, would be darker. So that's what you do. You adjust your glass to fit whatever it is you're trying to accomplish with your, it's like a painting, a glass painting, but your painting is this glass. You have to find where it looks the best. You have to move it around. But again, nothing is one color in nature. If you look closely at any plant or tree, you'll find it's full of color. So those are the three different cartoons and how I use them. And I'll go ahead and show you how it actually works when you cut the glass and fit it, etc. So here's a thin lead. You can see that, the edge of that. It's wants to blur quite a bit. There. See that lead? That's an H shape. Here's one that's much thicker. See how much bigger that lead is? That'll hide a multitude of sins if you don't cut your glass just right. If I could see. So this glass is going to fit in that lead cane. That H shape. See that? Yeah, there you go. It fits in there like that. And you solder the ends together in a nutshell. There. So, first thing we're going to do is we're going to attach these 1x3s to our cartoon here. We're going to use that to work against, okay? This keeps everything square. So, again though, you got to be careful. When you set this up, we're going to use the lead to make sure that our glass is even. And then we're going to screw these boards down, just using the screw gun. Same thing, down the side, screw it down pretty tight. I want this to move. It's good. All right, so these are the beveled pieces that I picked up and rearranged to make into a vase shape. And I had a little problem here with this thing fitting together. Obviously it wasn't made to fit. So what I'm going to do, this isn't going to fit well enough. So I'm going to take where I made that mark. I'm going to trim that piece of the glass off using a grinder. See that? It's not going to fit the way it is. So I'm going to do just a little modification here. I'll show you how. This is a glass grinder. It's got a diamond tip wheel there. Let me get out of my own light. I made that little mark, see it? So all I'm doing, trimming that off, match. Let's start with that. When you use that glass grinder, you want to dry the stuff off, because if you get your cartoon wet, it'll fall apart, which is not too pleasant. So let's see if it fits any better. Yeah, it's getting there. I might take a little more off here or there. That's getting pretty close. I got to cut the tip off of that. See that tip? I'm going to have to kind of wing it a little bit on the fly, and that's okay. I'm going to do something else. I found this big blue iridized jewel, or not a jewel, it's just a blob, glass blob. But I think that's kind of pretty. I think I'm going to put that right there, because I don't have a good intersection there with my little design. Again, using what I had, I'm going to modify that so that that thing fits in there. I think that might look kind of cool. And then, so I like to put these little glass features in there, blobs, jewels, things like that. And the glass around here that's going to round out the vase is also going to be a water glass, similar to that particular hue. And I'm going to put I'll just put a little piece of blue glass under it. So I think that might make it all tie together. So I'm going to go ahead and grind that out. Okay, so I have carved out a spot for this little blob to fit in, and there is how it will look. Yeah, I like that. That solves the problem I had there with I didn't like how that fit together. But I'll just put a little piece of blue glass below that. I think that will give me a pretty interesting looking focal point for my vase. Alright, so I have placed, can't see it hardly because it's clear glass, but I've placed the glass, or the bevels, back on here since I've modified them a little bit. So what I've done is I've traced around where they're going to come now, and I'm just going to mark, get rid of these. So I don't, when I cut my pieces, they will fit. And all I've done is marked where that's going to go. So basically adjust it on the fly. So for my vase, I'm going to use this bluish water. It's called water glass, and you can guess why it's called water glass, because of the texture it has on it. It seems to shimmer like water. So I'm going to be using that for the blue pieces around the vase. It doesn't make a huge amount of difference, but I think I'm going to make that little piece there, it's a little dark on the top, the first piece I cut. So all I'm doing is tracing the design of this onto my glass. With a Sharpie permanent marker. And you'll kind of see what I just traced on there. Yeah, so I'm going to cut that with a glass cutter now. You keep bench brush, because when you go to cut your glass breaks glass. If you got little chips or chunks of glass on your bench, and you when you lay this glass down on it, it's going to break. It could. You hear that? There's glass under that. I got to make a little more room. All right, I'm using kind of a fancy glass cutter. It's got oil in the handle there. See that? When you push down on the glass, there's a little wheel, glass cutting wheel. See that? It's right there. It spins around. And it's probably carbide steel or very strong steel wheel there. And when you push it, the oil feeds the wheel, so you always keep the glass cutter oiled. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead. I hold it kind of like a pencil. You hold it that way. I'm going to go ahead and cut this down to size because it's a little big right now. Now you see how quickly I did that? When you make a cut, you want to get to it quickly because the cut will get kind of stale. It will, when you first cut it, the atoms, I guess, in the glass are moving apart. But while the cut is still fresh, you pop it. Okay? This glass is relatively easy to cut. Let me cut. I got to cut it further down to size. And you just pop it. So there's my little piece. Now I'm going to cut this curve. Now when I cut this, I'm going to cut to the inside of that line, right? Because what happens if I don't? If I cut it on the outside of the line, or even right on the line, the lead, remember the lead came right here? This lead is going to fit on there like so, right? See that? And again, that web inside that thing is about a 1/16 of an inch thick. So you're going to cut to the inside of your line because your line is just about the same width as the inside web of that H-came of lead. All right, to follow that. So I'm cutting it just to the inside of that line. All right. Again, if I cut it the exact size and I put the lead on it, it's going to, as I put it together, it's going to get bigger and bigger, and it's going to get off. Okay. So you want to make sure. Now, what some people will do is they have a special scissors that cuts a little sliver of paper out of the middle of your cartoon, just exactly the same width as this came here. They'll spray this paper, they'll cut the whole design out in little, like a puzzle, and it'll automatically allow that little bit of room you need between the glass to get the lead in, okay? And they'll meticulously spray all those little pieces with adhesive and stick it on the glass, cut around it, and that'll give them the exact size. That's way too tedious for me because I can do it this way. It works. I mean, it's up to you. I mean, some people are really like how that works. Good, do it. But me, I don't like to do it, and I would rather just do it like this, by eyeballing it and cutting it just right so it fits together and it doesn't expand and get off whack. So let me cut this and I'll show you. So here I am, I'm cutting a curve. Alright, so when you cut a curve, you might want to tap it like that. See that? How nice that broke? You can see it's curved. But if you look closely, I cut just to the inside of that line to allow for that H-can. Now I'm going to cut this out. One more. There. There's the piece. Okay, that's what we envisioned having cut. Alright. So what I'm going to do is I usually take my little grinder and just, because this is very sharp, I'll go ahead and grind it a little bit to get the rough burrs off of it and just make sure I actually didn't miss with my cut, and I'll get this thing to fit just right. Alright, so here we're going to cut, we have to cut an inside circle. You can see that. Now these are a little bit tricky. So I'll show you what you have to do. I don't know if you can see this. But you have to make a series of cuts. First cut around the circle. And then cut another one just inside that circle. and do it maybe 3 times, and then tap it. And then we use what's called a grozing pliers, and we're going to pop these little cuts out one by one. First that one. So we're just taking them out little by little. Working our way around. And then there, see, now you've cut an inside circle there. And those are a little bit harder to do. They take a little more time and patience. And they are, you risk making mistakes if you go too fast. All right, so there is the flower pot roughed out. And then we'll go ahead and start putting the background in. I'm going to work my way from the bottom up. Okay, I'm going to cut this up. Piece. Let's grind that up a little bit. So we've got a lot of the glue chip in place, and now we'll fill in, at least the bottom half, these palm-like leaves will be our next subject, and we'll pick the glass for those. So we're going to select our first piece of glass, and it's that yellow leaf there, or plant, and I'm going to select it. Light source, again, it's coming from this direction. So we've picked a piece of yellow glass, and about, you look for the, and when you're looking at this glass, it's got a lot of different variation in it. This one's got a very light spot, so you can almost see a big hole almost in the yellow. So I'm going to use that to accentuate the light source coming from the left side. See, if I move that around on the glass, I can adjust it to where I can make a painting, so to speak. There it is with it, you know. As I shift it around, yeah. So there's where I want it, so that the light is bright there and it gets a little darker here. And you have this little, like, grain going here. I think that'll look good. I'll cut that out, and then again you'll have this bright spot here where the sun is coming down on it. It's yellow because it's getting a lot of sun. This will be a darker green up here. I think you'll see in the end how that will work. So I'm going to cut that out, mark it, cut it out like that. The only trouble is you have to cut. Cutting that right out of the middle of this piece of glass, but that happens to be what I want, so I'll use the rest of it for something else. but I found a spot that I think would be the best piece of glass to use. All right, this is a very fancy piece of glass. This is a mottled glass, those little blotches. So I've looked this over carefully, and if you can see under here, the cartoon is there. And this is the yellow piece we just made. So to transition to that, I'm going to go with this piece here. It's a little bit darker up in here, and then it lightens up almost like a yellow there, so at the tip, so that when it comes around, again, the light source come in this direction, this will kind of be illuminated, and it'll blend in with this yellow piece here, and it'll be darker down in here. Just gonna could even do that a little bit so there's a little bit of light on the top of that. So I'm gonna see what I can do with that. All right, there are some of the greeneries. All right, so here we're going to cut, we have to cut an inside circle. You can see that. Now these are a little bit tricky, so I'll show you what you have to do. I don't know if you can see this, but you have to make a series of cuts. First cut around the circle, and then cut another one just inside that circle, and do it maybe 3 times, and then tap it, and then we use what's called a grozing pliers, and we're going to pop these little cuts out one by one. First that one, so we're just taking them out little by little. Working our way around. And then there, see, now you've cut an inside circle there. And those are a little bit harder to do. They take a little more time and patience. And they are, you risk making mistakes if you go too fast. All right, so there is the flower pot roughed out. And then we'll go ahead and start putting the background in. I'm going to work my way from the bottom up. And what we're going to use for that, in keeping with this Victorian style window, something called glue chip. You can see that. All it is, on this side is smooth, like a regular piece of double strength glass. And the way they make this is they rough up the surface, the smooth surface, and they pour glue all over the whole thing. And then when the glue dries, it contracts, and it pulls off the surface of the glass. So you get this kind of a Jack Frost thing going, and that is called a glue chip. And it's sort of a diffused kind of a texture. And again, this side's being smooth. So this will be our background. So the flower pot and the flowers will be set in this kind of glass glue chip. Okay, I'm going to cut this up. Piece. grind that up a little bit. I've cut a piece of lead. This is the thin lead. I mentioned a little bit earlier, not as thick. So I'm going to use this thinner lead here, where this line is simply a line that had to be there to be able to cut the glass. All right, it's not really part of the design or the flowers. So I'm going to use this thin lead to kind of make it not as bold or as large of a line. So I'll pull this. You can see the lead on the edge is thicker. So you just cut it to fit. Okay. And that's got lead around it. Get it? You gotta make sure it gets that the glass is in the cane, in the lead. And once you get it in there, you hold it in place using a nail like this. You can use these. This is actually a horseshoer's nail. Horseshoer's nail. This is the kind of nail that they nail the steel horseshoes onto the bottom of the horse's foot. They actually use a nail. This is it. This is a horseshoer's nail. And the nail goes into all that hoof, which is kind of like fingernail material, let's call it. I don't think it really hurts them much because it's all this dead skin like fingernail stuff. But anyway, that's a horseshoer's nail. They work great because they're kind of flat on one side and they're very sharp. So you take a horseshoer's nail and you hold your work in place until you solder it. So I'm going to use a little bit wider lead all around for the vase. I want the vase to be a little bit, I'm going to use the wider lead for that. So I just kind of follow the contour of whatever my cut is with the lead. Get a mark. I just simply cut it with these. And let me see if it's right. Okay, it's a little long. Cut it 3 times, it's still too short. My dad used to say. Alright, so there's the heavier lead. See that there? I'm going to put a horseshoer's nail in there. Hold that temporarily. Gotta make sure it's in there. If you feel like, well, maybe it's not in there, well, listen to your instincts, because it probably isn't. So we've got a lot of the glue chip in place, and now we'll fill in at least the bottom half. These palm-like leaves will be our next subject, and we'll pick the glass for those. So we're going to select our first piece of glass, and it's that yellow leaf there, or plant, and I'm going to select it. Light source, again, is coming from this direction. So we've picked a piece of yellow glass, and you look for when you're looking at this glass, it's got a lot of different variation in it. This one's got a very light spot. So you can almost see a big hole almost in the yellow. So I'm going to use that to accentuate the light source coming from the left side. See, if I move that around on the glass, I can adjust it to where I can make a painting, so to speak. There it is with it, you know. As I shift it around, wait a minute. Yeah. So there's where I want it, so that the light is bright there and it gets a little darker here. And you have this little, like, grain going here. I think that'll look good. I'll cut that out. And then again, you'll have this bright spot here where the sun is coming down on it. It's yellow because it's getting a lot of sun. This will be a darker green up here. I think you'll see in the end how that will work. So I'm going to cut that out, mark it, cut it out like that. The only trouble is you have to cutting that right out of the middle of this piece of glass, but that happens to be what I want. So I'll use the rest of it for something else. But I found a spot that I think would be the best piece of glass to use. All right, this is a very fancy piece of glass. This is a mottled glass, those little blotches. So I've looked this over carefully, and if you can see under here, the cartoon is there. And this is the yellow piece we just made. So to transition to that, I'm going to go with this piece here. It's a little bit darker up in here, and then it lightens up almost like a yellow there, so at the tip, so that when it comes around, again the light source come in this direction, this will kind of be illuminated, and it'll blend in with this yellow piece here, and it'll be darker down in here. Just gonna, there are some of the greeneries. Yeah, it's gonna be lighter on the left side, more translucent. That will be a blob of flowers there. What are you doing? Is your tongue sticking out? I thought so. Scallywag. Alright, this piece of glass here is a streaky glass. Obviously, it's a piece of green glass with streaks in it. As I move it, you can see the streaks. And this piece of glass is also what's called iridescent. It's been iridized. It has a metal coating over the edge, outside of it. It makes it, gives it an extra shine and reflective quality, a kind of rainbowish effect. So it's an iridized green streaky glass. And so what I want to do with this, I'm going to use it on these leaves that sort of hang down here. Many times you'll see leaves and they'll have like a seam going down the middle, or crease, and it'll be two sides. One will be, obviously one side's going to be darker than the other because it'll either be higher or lower. We're going to say that this back side will be the lighter side. And then what I'll do is I'll find a streak. Let's start with this one on the end here. So if I line up the streak just right, there, or let's see, let me find a better one. Here, there. You see how that looks more like a leaf now? It's half of it's light, and the other half is darker. So if I do that, I'm going to get a thing that looks a lot more like a leaf. So I'm going to do that on each one of these to give it more of a realistic appearance with this iridized glass, which will make it look quite pretty. Okay, so it's hard to show in this light here with this camera, but you can see the effect there. One side's lighter than the other on all these. Okay, so that, and I like how I kind of drew this. These shapes are kind of jaunty looking, angular. It almost has like an Art Nouveau appearance. All right, this glass here is called, some people call it confetti glass or streamer glass or frit glass, and I'm going to put a piece of that in to make it look like looks like little stems coming up with just sort of like the confetti looking stuff in there. I'm just going to use a little piece of it because this, I've already traced it, and that'll give me a couple of things that look like stems going up through there. It's time to put some lead on this glass, put it together. So I'm going to cut a length of this off the spool I keep up here, and then we're going to stretch it. I use these cutters here to cut the lead. Work quite well. So this, a lot of shadows. Let's see if I can show you that. That's a lead vise. You put this, slip the lead in here, you tap it, and then you grab you stretch the lead, you'll see me stretching. You'll see it straighten out as I pull on it. There. Nice and straight, gets all the kinks out of it. And you just take it out of the vise. And then I usually just snip that little piece off because it's been damaged by the vise. And then you have a nice straight piece of lead. It stiffens it, makes it a little bit stronger. But the main thing is to straighten it out. Don't pull too much. So we'll put a small piece of lead and a horseshoer's nail to kind of hold that piece in place. And we just put it all together, get it ready to solder up. There's our blob. What are you doing? Oh, for crying out loud. All right, so in thinking about this flower here, you know, the light source coming this direction. So what would happen here? The light would illuminate this part, right? And this, and this top part. Maybe the part and part of that. So this would kind of be in shadow here. It's flat now, it looks like nothing. And this would be in a little bit of shadow because our leaves are kind of curled out. This would kind of be in shadow here. Shadow. This would be more light. And then down here, you're going to be more in shadow. And on the back of here, shadowy. Maybe some here. And there might be some, this leaf, let's assume that this leaf is in front of that one, so there might be a little bit of shadow behind there even. It's definitely going to be darker down here. And then, like I say, you're going to have darkness here. And then this little inner thing is going to be this little button here. It's going to look a little bit like that. This will be lighter, darker on the back side as it curls over. You know, and you might have a little bit of darkness along that edge, assuming that one's in front of this other one here. So it begins to take a little bit of three-dimension. So here's the flower cut out with the light effect going on. So some of it's obviously lighter up here, you know, where the sun would be hitting it from that direction. Okay, there is flower number 2. Here are some other flowers. Alright, this is the iris, arguably one of the more important flowers in our arrangement. So what happened here? You'll notice that these flowers that are turned back away are lighter than the ones on the front. Even though this would probably be in shadow if if the sun were coming this direction. Arguably, though, that when the light hits a thing like that, it will make it get real bright. But to give a sense of depth to this plant or the flower, when things are dark, they appear closer in the foreground, whereas things that are lighter in glass and in a lot of things will tend to appear farther away. You know, usually this is mostly apparent when you're doing like a landscape where you have the atmosphere. When you're looking far off into the distance at the horizon line, you look at maybe some mountains, they appear sort of, you know, almost foggy or like there's a haze over them. They're not as distinct, there's less detail, and it's light because this atmosphere has a tendency to make things look lighter because you're looking through all this light-colored stuff in the air, or the way the light is hitting whatever's in the air makes it appear light. And anyway, So, using that kind of principle here, I think it works, even though it's not what you might actually see. But for the purpose of this glass, I think it does give it some depth, makes this look farther away, and these look closer to the forefront. All right, well, here is our second little batch of iris. Okay, there it is. So, we have a number of small pieces of glass, and rather than use the lead, you can use a thin lead, but rather than do that, often where there's a case like this, what is used is a what's called a copper foil method of creating the window. So it's not unusual to mix the two together, a lead window with some copper foil, again, where there's small pieces. So the way this works, you take what is essentially it's like tape, and it's got a copper, literally it's copper, it's a little strip of copper with adhesive on the back. So you peel the backing off of it, and what you do, I've washed these little pieces with Windex. You wrap this so that this stuff will stick. You wrap this copper foil around the edge of the glass, like so. You get it right down the middle. And then bend it over. See that? So you're wrapping this thing on the edge with copper, basically. And copper, the solder will stick to that. This little tool I use for various things, mostly for prying the glass into the lead, but it works pretty well to smooth out the edge of this copper foil, make sure it's stuck. So once you can see that the glass now has a piece of copper wrapped around the edge of it. And then I'll show you what we do with that after you kind of see it. See that? It's got a piece of copper foil wrapped around it. All right, so you see the flowers coming together. Soldered up some more of these. And the bottom part pretty well under control. And a big shamble of glass up here, but it's all cut out. Now we've switched from the copper foil over to the lead. And you can see the lines are so much nicer with the lead. You have to rework that a little bit to get those beads to look like the lead. That's the idea. But anyway, there's our iris going in. And there's that little piece of fracture glass. Little stems. Again, this is the fracture glass with the streamer. I think that's going to be an interesting little touch. It kind of makes it a little more natural looking, like a little. There's another one there, stuck in there, tiny one. So it just adds to the. Just makes it look more like a batch of plants rather than a bunch of glass cut out. Okay, you're going to solder It's copper foil. Get it a little bit hotter yet. Put a little flux on it. Kind of tin it. And put flux on all the joints. Again, to clean and allow the solder to flow. All right. I'll usually kind of tack this here and there, just kind of hold it in place. So here I'm using the glass grinder to clean up these pieces of glass. It's just kind of a safety thing. If you don't grind these edges, when you first cut them, they're very sharp. So I usually just hit them all around the edges. Anything that's not exactly straight, adjust it here. Then if the glass is thick, I'll kind of hit it like that so it goes into the lead easier. Bevel the edge just very slightly so it doesn't hang up and slide it into the lead. Make sure these square. We used to do that with a stone. It was not like a, I don't know, 6-inch long stone, maybe that wide. It was like a piece of grinding stone. You just kind of scraped it across the edges to knock the sharp edges off and to kind of slightly bevel it so it will go into the lead without snagging. So what I've done is reshape this thing to look like this, and that will enable me to get it into the window. I don't see that very well. Hard to see. There. Anyway, it's been reshaped, and it will now. I can get that to go in there like that. I'm going to use a little red square to kind of an accent there. Now I'll stick one of those on each corner to kind of give it a little bit of interest. And kind of tie in with these bevels here. Alright, so here we are, just putting the last few pieces of the frame on. That'll about do it. We're kind of winding down on the glass part of this. What we're doing is putting this zinc border on it to stiffen it. The zinc is here's a picture of the piece that goes around the edge of this to stiffen it up. As you can see, it's a square tube of metal, and then it also has a groove in it to receive the glass. So that tube, if you will, adds strength. And once you solder that to all the pieces of lead, you're going to have a fairly stiff edging on that thing to make this thing strong. So we're going to go ahead and put the zinc border on. I've got one piece in place, and I'm going to cut a 45-degree angle on this piece using a thing called a Dremel tool. This does a nice job. It's going to cut a 45-degree angle right here. Alright, and then that piece will go right here. I'll go ahead and install it. Take that off. Let's have it clamped. Take out all these nails that are holding the edges in. I got it all soldered up, one side of it. See, so that'll go right. You can get it all. That'll go right like that. It'll slip on the edge of the glass. All right, so now we're going to solder the zinc edging onto the lead. There we are. That looks a little rough. Let's see if we can tidy that up. We're gonna need some more flux. Let's give it a good bath. See if we can't smooth it out. Gotta get it hot. This look a little better. Still got a little problem here. You don't want any big lumps here because it won't fit in the window right when you go to set it. Forgot that joint. It's flux. See, that's all it should take. A little too much solder, I think. Okay, are we done? No, we're not. We have to flip this thing over and solder the other side. The problem is the glass is only half as strong as it's going to be. It's or less than half. It's very weak. It's only held together by the lead and the solder on one side. So I'm going to have to flip this thing over and solder the other side and hope that the video doesn't show up on an episode of Fail Army or something where it just busts all apart. But I'm going to try to mitigate some of the stress using cardboard. Slip this under there. Kind of give it a little something. All right, here goes nothing. I'm gonna try it. Up. Okay, balance it. Now let it down. And we did it. Now it's flipped over. All right, we got to solder this whole thing up. Solder the other side. All right, well, next thing we're going to do is dye the lead. Or use a patina. Be darned if I didn't miss the joint right here. Got it. All right. And what that means is we're going to use a patina. It's really like an acid, probably what is it? Nitric acid is what this stuff is, so don't drink it. And what this will make a dramatic change. Makes the lead turn black. It really makes the drawing look different. I think it improves it. Pretty good job on that zinc as it is. This is the bar I put in to strengthen it. And unfortunately, it makes a line go across your work, but hey, it's in life. Gotta have it. It's gonna last 100 years or more. Keep it. Do it right. Part of that is having that bar in there. Because it will sag if you do not, under its own weight. All right. I've got the trisodium phosphate on there, and I'm scrubbing it with a long-handled brush. Now, I might add, if you want the window to have magic in it, you have to do this by the light of the full moon on the 4th of July at 2 o'clock in the morning. So that's the secret there. All right, let's rinse it off a little. going on. The light of the street light. All right, scrub it a bit more. There's the window. Brought it in here to let it dry overnight, and tomorrow we'll hold it up to the sun and have a look at it. Once it dries out, we'll grout it, and that'll be finished. The final step is to take this mixture of cement, plaster of Paris, whiting, black dye powder, and mix boiled linseed oil with it to create a cementitious material, grout, if they call it a grout, and it'll be rubbed on the glass, and it'll go between the glass and the lead to solidify everything. Right now, these pieces rattle. Once we put this grout on everything and get it work it into the between the glass and the lead, it'll make everything solid. It dries hard. It'll stiffen everything up, make it weather tight, and it'll make the window a solid, assembly. So with that, we'll go ahead and grout the window. All right, so we're going to start slinging this goop on the window. Show you a little bit how to do it. So you take this little stiff brush and just work it in. You don't have to worry about it on the copper foil so much because there's no gap really. But you got to work it in on the lead. You just rub it in. Get it between the glass and the lead. Cement it. Okay, once you've got the thing grouted up, you feel like you got all the joints, then you can clean it off using whiting, which is just basically ground up chalk, like you would use on a chalkboard. Sprinkle that over it, and that'll pick up the excess, kind of polish everything up. And you have to grout the back of the window too, front and back. I forgot to mention, in that grout mixture there you might find some turpentine also. Love the smell of that turpentine and boiled linseed oil. It's got all kind of chemicals and strange things. Get it into the zinc on the edges. Work that grout in to seal it and glaze it. Okay, once you get as far as you can with that, you may need to go around with a little tool and clean up the edges of the lead, the grout out of there, especially around this zinc. Gets caught under there and you got to get it out. It'll block the glass. And just got to make sure and you can take a little tool like this. It's hard to do when you're holding a phone on one hand. Kind of dangerous too, I might say. This glass, it's in a door and it's old, so it's annealed glass. If this glass breaks, it'll break into dagger-like shards, very sharp. If you replace a window like this, from an old, you should use tempered glass or safety glass, because anything that's in a moving panel is considered a hazardous location. Now there is one exception in the building code, at least one, for this, and it's for decorative stained glass panels. So we're not going to be worried about that part.